And okay, and so today actually the plan is to talk about Heroku, which is hosting your server online, Express server online, and a little bit about the fetch as well. And but last week we didn't quite finish, and so we're gonna finish that first, and before move on to Heroku and fetch. And this is where we kind of get stuck the last week, and is when we try to do the post. And the post is a command where you add a new information to the, like a new document to the server. That's when you're starting to use post. And then we keep getting errors. Last week couldn't get it done. And then I find out the reason is the way we connecting the database. And if you could look at this site, and this was the code we used to connect to the MongoDB. And this is the correct one. Okay, and so the difference is just this bit. Okay, so this is the bit which when you try to generate in the connection issue strings from the Mongo Atlas, it will add these automatically. So if I just show you again, I have to log in here. And I think, yeah. Okay, and so hopefully you can see the page enough. And so this is the interface when you connect to or log into your Mongo Atlas, and when you choose connect cluster, and we need to use connect to your applications, and then this will be the string generator which we copy paste here. And as you can see, and by default, and it will add these at the end. Okay, so this is the bit which is causing the problems. So basically, when you copy paste this one and add to your actual server, you need to take out this bit. So we obviously didn't do that last week. So that's why we're causing the problems. Now you can see we still have the very similar string, and the only difference is I removed this part when connected to the database. Okay, and once that's done, and the post part should be okay. And so we can see, and that's our the post route. What it does is you have to say /collections and followed by collection name. So you have to specify which collection you want to add the JSON document to. And then all it does is just do an insert, which sends the body of the request, which sends the body of the request, and just send that into the insert that into the particular collections you specified here. So that's what the RQ dot collection will get you. And last time, and we created the request in the actual and in the Postman with actually a body which sends the information. So I'm gonna start Postman now. Okay, I think this is the one we have. So that was the post request, which is exactly this one here, which is already being shown on the screen. And you can see, and then in the body, we choose the role and we choose to JSON. And this is the records we want to insert into. And then here you can see the actual URL. We say the collection and then / collection name. So we want to insert into the collection called the products. And this is the new product we want to add to our online web store. And I can also open the Compass as well. So you can see the database before we insert. Take a slightly bit time to load. Okay, and I'm going to connect it to my Atlas, my MongoDB host on Atlas, and it's all working fine. Go to Web Store, go to Products, and you can see, and these are the ones currently in my database collection, or the products, and the products collection. Let me make it even bigger. And can you see the text inside the MongoDB campus? Okay, or is that still too small?
It's too small.
Okay, bigger.
Oh, good.
Yeah, is that okay now?
But
Okay. Okay. So you can see, and these are the ones we had before: cat food, yarn, kitty litter, etc. And there's laser point as well. These are the new ones, and I added when I testing. So I'm gonna just remove them for now. Okay. So now if I run this request inside the Postman, it should add a new product in here. And that should be the information, the ID, title, and price. Okay, and then before I can do that, I need to start my backend. So I need to go to my Visual Studio Code. Then I open up my, so I can make it a bit bigger now. I open the command line just to make sure I am in MongoDB API.demo. So that looks like the correct place. And you should use npm start. Okay, and so that's running now. I can just do some tests. For example, just to make sure. Okay, I can run this one. So it says get root request. That's one of pre-saved request in Postman. I can just send. Okay, and this send back a message. That's exactly what we expected because we didn't specify anything. And if we run get all products, and it should return back. Okay, and yeah, so it automatically formats that for you as well. So it retrains everything currently in your database. Okay, and let's now try again. So we're gonna send this post request. Okay, so, and I click send. Yay, so now you can see here, I got not an error message, but some information. So that's a response to send back and get back from after you inserting a document into the MongoDB collection. So you can see these are the information we set, and this is the ID which the MongoDB created, and when they insert a new document. So if we now switch to the campus, and so this is our products collection, and so if I refresh now, so currently it shows has 5 products, and if I refresh, and it should show 6 products now, and we have this last product here. So exactly what we wanted. So the ID, the name, and the price. Okay. So, and then back to the code, just again, and the only thing I want to repeat here is the only change we did is in terms of connection string, we didn't, that's the extra bit which automatically add by the MongoDB Atlas at the end when you try to copy it from there, which is not needed. We need to remove it to get it to work. And in terms of actual the post router itself, and it's the same. We didn't make any more changes. Yeah. Okay, and we can now get back to the actual slides. Okay, so we've done the post request now. Okay, and this is something we already demonstrated the last week. We can specify a particularly an object or items we want to retrieve. You just need to get the ID from the database, and you can specify. We also talk about this. So how do you rerun all the requests? And you can redo this individually, as I just did. Just select it from the collection and try and do send. Or you can redo everything altogether, everything in the collection altogether. Again, not going to repeat. You should see this if it's okay. Okay, and this is about retrieving a certain object, which we already done.
Recording in progress.
Okay, and then this is another one, and which is about the put. So this put is actually used to update a record in the collection in the MongoDB. Okay, and you need to define the route. And so here we still use /collection as a text string as part of the route, and you need to specify the collections you want to update, and finally you specify the ID, which is the an ID of the JSON object you want to update. Okay, I've already explained this. Okay, and so in terms of the command that you use, so this is something you would type in the Mongo command line interface, and we're going to using update, and you're going to set the request body so that again the actual changes you want to make should be stored in the body part of the request, and you set, and it will replace the particular attribute of that JSON object in the specific collection. Okay, and in terms of return, it will return the number of objects affected. So in this case, we're really expecting should be only one because we're specifying a specific ID of the record. So it shouldn't not be more than one. If there's more than one, that's probably an error. Okay, and also 0 is possible. And if the particular ID, it cannot be found in the document collection. And in that case, that will be 0. Okay, and so will be the actual put. So, okay, I'm gonna just add this new route to our backend now. So this is our put, and in terms string, it will be collection, and followed by collection name, and followed by the ID of the object that you want to update. Okay, so that's a particular string. Oops, why is it not doing anything? Okay, and then you have stray object as we done here. Okay, and then we would have the, oh, why it's not typing? You need and the request, result, and next. And with this, you're gonna do actual the function that you will do the things. Okay, as I said, because and this time we're gonna update one of the JSON document. So here we're gonna using update, say instead of using insert or find one, we're gonna using update. Okay, and everything else will be the part of the parameter for the update. Okay, and yeah. So first we need to set the ID of the particular JSON object we want to update. So you have to create a new object ID, and its value is going to be the request object and all its parameters, and among them the particular ID. So this ID is going to pick up this value here. So this line will create a new object ID object, and slightly awkward, and its value will be this ID, which is what user typed in the URL. And then says a particular operation, we're gonna set using the whatever is in the body of the message. Okay, and we say save is true, and multi is false. We're gonna explain that what these means and in a second. And then finally, once you get this right, and you get either an error message or a return results object. And for these two, okay, and if you have an error object, so basically if E is not empty, and you will return next E, so that points to the actual, so just return the actual error object. And otherwise, you would just send. Okay, okay. So this is come back to what we talked about before. Here we said it will actually return the count of affected objects, and we know it should be one because we are specifying an ID, and it should be only one items or JSON object with the ID in the collection. So that's what this part does. And so it says send. So essentially, this is one of the kind of shorthand writing if then else. So that just basically means if results.results.n is slightly awkward, and you have to get the results object out of this result here, and if it's n, which is a number equal to 1, and you send a message, say success. Otherwise, you send a message which you say it's an error. So basically anything that's not 1, you'll give it error. Okay. And result.n equal to 1. And if it's yes, we say we send a JSON object. It says message, say success, and if not, we'll send a JSON object error. Okay. So I now saved, and because I was using node more to start my script, so the server is automatically restarted, and so that should be running, so that I should be able to test it out in my Postman now. Actually, yeah. So just before we do that, we can just briefly explain this line here. So what it does, it says unsafe equal to true means wait for the execution before run the callback function. So what it says, don't run these until the update function is completed. So it's almost like a promise you have on the front end. It forces the code to wait until the set is completed. And also multiple equal to false, and it's just say force it only to process one items. If there are even if there are multiple there are multiple, how do I say? There are multiple and JSON documents which meet the requirement, still only just process the first one. Okay, and then this line here is just shorthand say if n equal to 1, the number of documents updated is equal to 1, and you send back the true condition, which is success, and otherwise you send error. And you only if do this, if the error object itself is not empty, you will run this part, and you will skip this part because that will finish stop the function. Okay, and this is what you need to do in terms of the changes. So now you need to create a new request, and then obviously you have to set the method as put, and then here you have to follow the format we specified in the route, and which is you have to say collection and then followed by collection name and then the ID of the object you want to identify, and this ID you have to copy from the MongoDB. Okay, that is what we're going to do now. We'll just go to Postman. We're going to just create a new request. Let's give, then we first change this to put, and then in terms of an actual attributes, we're going to do something like this. We will say localhost 3000. Maybe I'll make this bigger as well. I say localhost 3000 collection. Yes, we're going to do products. And for example, I don't remember which product is this now. I just need to check. If I go to my compass, can I just type in here? No. Okay, and let's just say we want to update this value. So I'm going to change the ID to this. So instead of that, I'm going to do this. And this one changes because every time you create a new object in JSON, you get different ID. Okay. We can't really send yet because we haven't really set the changes we want to make. And so if we go back to slides, again, you need to add the change to the body of your request. And again, I'm going to choose raw and say the format is JSON. And in this case, we can only change the price to 49. So it was 123.11. So we can just want to change that to 49. And you click send. And if everything goes okay, you should get a message back, says message success. Okay, so we're going to go to Postman. We need to choose body. We need to send something. That will be in JSON format. And actual body, gonna send, or maybe just say this. I would say price. I want to change to 49. Okay. I think it's probably doesn't like an single quote. It still prefers double quote here. That's why this curly red line says it's error. Okay. Now if I change to double quote, it will be happy. And now I can click send. Yay, okay. Now we get the message back, say success. So that means it runs on the backend and contacted the MongoDB Atlas, and it seems all worked. So just to check this, I can hide this side. Okay. And if I just refresh here, okay, and you can see here the price is now 49. Yeah, so that means it's successfully updated. Okay, and go back to the slide. Okay. Yeah, and this is something you need to be aware. You only need to specify the field that changes, and in examples, we only change the price, And you can see the other fields like the ID and title remains the same. So you don't have to specify ID or title again. And if it's not specified, they just keep as where they are, will remain the same. Okay, the last example is delete. And just because we are running kind of short of time, I'm not going to go through, but it's very similar to all the other route we created so far. And difference here, you say app.delete because you will respond to delete request. That's your route path, and you have to still specify and collection. Okay, I misspelled. It shouldn't be an E there. And followed by 2 parameters, which is actual collection and the documents in that collection that you want to delete. Okay, and then the actual command or the MongoDB command you use is called delete1. So we previously was update or insert one or something or find. In this case, will be called delete1. So you say request.collection.delete1, and you need to create an object ID object with the ID. So that specifies the particular JSON object you want to delete. The ID again is what user entered or what comes with the request. And that's all you need. So the delete one would run and delete the documents with this ID value. And then again, you can do a callback function which runs after this is complete. So if it is error, you send error message. So you return next.e, that's the next error object. Otherwise, and again, it's the same, you check and how many objects it has been affected. So it really should be only one because we're specifying a particular ID, and there's only one object or JSON object has the ID in the collection. So if it's the number of affected object is 1, you say message success. Otherwise, you say message error. Okay, yeah, and the other thing is slightly odd thing is, and you have to say result dot result. And so the first result is whatever name we put in here. It can be something different, but the number of affected object is under result, its own result object inside this object, and then .n. So something slightly odd there. Okay, and this part we already explained. So this question mark and then this column is a shorthand for if else. It's exactly the same as before. And you can do this in Postman. So you have to make sure this is delete, and that's the URL, and followed by name of the collections and the ID of the object you want to delete. And this time you don't have to put anything in the body, and because all the information now is already in the request. And if everything is okay, you click send, you should get a message back, tell you the deletion is successful. Okay, and so that's it. So now this is just last a few slides. It's just put all the code together, and let me see. Yeah, here we are still using the old local connection string. You need to be updated if you want to use that for your Mango Atlas connection. And all the different routes we use, the post, the put, and then delete, etc. And finally started the lesson. Okay, and for that part, that's the reading. And so this is about how to use. So basically, both are in terms of using the REST API and using Express. And this is something specifically about using the MongoDB node driver. So for example, using the find, update, etc. Okay, and that's that. Now we're gonna move on to this week's lecture. Okay, and so this week we're gonna mostly talk about Heroku. And we also again talk a little bit about in terms of front-end fetch. And previously we only do the fetch with say the get. Now we can do put and delete as well. So the fetch request will be slightly different. So I'm going to show you a couple of examples there as well. Okay, and first, this is initially, okay, and so this is where all the different components are located, and in last week, which we also just talked about. And so the front end is on your local computer, and in this case, it's the Postman, or you can write some code and say contain Vue.js. You will run on your local computer, and the server and runs on your local computer. And one thing you can know, because in the request we always say localhost 3000. That means it runs local computer, but and the server actually talk to the database, which is online. So the database is on Mongo Atlas, which is hosted online. Okay, and then in the first coursework, you already put your GitHub pages set up, which run your front end code online. Okay, so this once the front end is run on GitHub pages, that becomes remote. And but if you run exact the same code, try to access the server, try to say your Express server, which is still running on your local computer, it's not going to work. And because the GitHub pages don't have access to your local server, essentially a website cannot access directly anything run on your computer just for security reasons. And there's a way to go around this, but we're not going to cover in this module. So instead, what we want to do is we will try to put your server, which is middle block, online as well. So this is where the Heroku come in, which is the online service allows you to host your Express backend. And once this is backend, then all three paths will be backend, and they can all talk to each other. And also it can run without you run anything on your local computer. That means anyone on the computer can open your front end, it will work because it can talk to the server and database, which are both online. Okay, and that's actually how, if you actually want to make some apps, this is what the setup you need. You need online server and online database. So the people using your app can actually use them. If any of these is on your local computer and they can't use it, and just because they can't access your laptop or desktop PC, and even if they can, once you turn off your computer, they can't. And again, will stop them. And okay, just to say very briefly, so Heroku is a website, that's a URL, and that's what the page is going to look like once you open it up. Let me just turn this on. Okay, and so Heroku allows you to hold Node.js server, which including Express, but it actually supports many other languages as well, as you can see, and it hosts Java, PHP, Python, and quite a few others. Okay, and by putting your Express code there, that allows you to run your server online, so everyone can access it. And this is usually known as platform as a service. And the good thing is it saves you the maintenance. For example, you don't have to keep updating your node server or up and configure it to make sure it's secure, etc., etc. But it's still your responsibility to make sure your node server is up and running. So basically, you write a code called server.js or app.js, it might crash and it stopped. And it's your responsibility to make sure if it crashes, you restarted the server again. That is not something that Heroku can do it for you. Okay, and Heroku provide a free tier with limited resources, and you can have similar service from Amazon, Microsoft, and Google as well. But Heroku is one of the easier ones to to use, so that's why we picked it here. And also, it's one of the first ones, so actually lots of people are still using it. Okay, and also here we're going to deploy the backend from GitHub to Heroku. And so there are two ways to upload your backend to Heroku. You could do this from your machine and upload the code to Heroku. And the process is similar to that. You upload code to GitHub, but it's a little bit more complex. You have to install a command line tools from Heroku for that purpose. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna link Heroku to your GitHub repository, which has your backend code. Then it can get the code there automatically when the code on GitHub changes. Okay, so obviously to do this, you need to have your code, backend code on GitHub repository, which you haven't done yet. As I said, and this way you don't have to install the Heroku command line tools interface, or what CLI means, on your local computer. And then your server on the Heroku will be automatically updated whenever you push new changes to your GitHub repository. So that's quite convenient. So you only need to push your code once, and the server will get automatically updated. Okay, and then you first need to, and obviously you need to sign up an account to use it. I'm sure all of you can do this quite easily. Ah, no. Yeah. Okay. So for me, obviously it doesn't work because I already created an account and it goes straight to my account. And we're gonna come to that very soon. But this is kind of sign up page and nothing special. Just and as most sign up pages, you enter your name, email address, and allows you to create an account. Okay, and then it goes to something like this, which is what the Heroku would look like. Let me log in. Okay, and so the first time it looks slightly different, and because I already created something, and so that looks like this, called CST3145. I'm gonna create a new one, and in your case, we probably just want to create a new app. That means we want to create an Express server. Okay. So before we do that, there's a few things and we need to do, and in terms of to make the backend code work on the Heroku server. And if you just put it there, it's straight away the one we just created in our Visual Studio Code, it won't work. So if we just copy this code or just upload this one directly onto Heroku, and it will not work. And you just only need some small changes to get this to work. So we're going to come back to this page in terms of setting up the apps a little bit later once we made the changes to our backend code. Okay, and the first thing is you have to make sure you have the startup script and in your Heroku, and because Heroku will always run npm start to start your node backend, and it doesn't know any other way. You cannot say, and I want to use node app.js or say a node more server.js with some parameters. You can't do that. And Heroku always just use run npm start. So the actual command, you have to make sure it's set up in the startup directory. Okay, and what I will do is I'm gonna actually, that's the other one. I'm gonna create that one on my, I'll create examples locally as well. Let me create a new folder for this demonstration. Okay, and so this is like an empty folder. And so what I'm going to do is I'm gonna copy over the files we just created. So this is the old one where we add all different routes and the package.json file to this new, okay. Okay, and so as I said, the first thing you have to make sure you have the start script. So you should have a script, and inside should have the start, and that should have the actual code. Actually, the command line you start the server. So okay, I'm gonna just use node in this case because I'm not expecting to make changes on the server, so it does not need to restart. And if you use node more, and that means you need to add node more to your dependencies as well, which is not included here yet. So I can just use node server.js. Okay, and this is other thing is quite important is how you have to change the server port. Okay, and when you run the server locally, you can choose a port. So you can set to 3,400 or 20 million, anything. But on the Heroku, the port is set by the Heroku site, so you can't change it. And every time you restart the server, the port itself can change as well. Uh, so instead, you have to set the port using this one. Okay, so this is like a one is it called environmental variables? I'm not going to spend time, I don't have time to explain what that is. But essentially, you just say on the Heroku, you need to get the port number using this. So that's the one way you can get the port that's set by Heroku and use that in your code. Okay, and the way we set like this is just says, and if this thing does not exist, or is empty, then it will use 3000. For example, when you run this locally, this value would not exist, then 3000 would work. But if this exists, and we're going to just using this one as my port. So when you start your app and you listen to this particular port. Okay, and so this is something you need to change in your server now, server file. And so here, which says app listen 3000, but instead, we need to define something. And I could even, yeah, anyway, simpler, write everything into one line. Constant equal, sorry. Constant port equal to process dot environment dot port or 3000. And then you're gonna listen on this particular port. Okay, so that's the change you need to do to get the whole thing run on Heroku, because Heroku would change the port and you need to set it properly every time. Okay, and then the other thing is, and as we already said, and Heroku is going to get your code from your GitHub repository. So obviously you need to have a GitHub repository which saves your backend code. And so if you haven't done that, you really should start now, and it's needed for the coursework 2 submission anyway. And
Kai, a quick
yeah,
question. When we are doing our coursework, can we create a public folder with the server where we can put the front end code so we can upload the front end and node server in a new repository?
yes, that's exactly what we are suggesting. So
Mhm.
for the first coursework, you create the front end. That needs to be run on GitHub pages, and
Yeah,
you need to make your repository public to do that.
yeah.
And for the backend or the node part, you should create a new repository, because that should not be public, because it contains, for example, your username, password, how to connect to the database. So that really should not be public.
Mm-hmm.
So it should be a separate one. That's what we are doing now.
Okay.
So, and you have another GitHub repository for your backend code, and it should be separate from the front-end code. So basically, these should be two separate repositories. That's all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay, and this is another thing. So when you create a repository on GitHub, you had the option to add a file called Git Ignore, and this allows you to list the files that you don't want to include in your repository. Okay, and you have the option to say do this on the server. Okay, and here we're going to choose node template. So GitHub has different template for different projects. For example, and if you create a Java project and it have a template for, okay, these are the files usually you shouldn't include for a Java project. And we are creating a Node project, and you have Node, and it has template, for example, for Mac. It will exclude things, Mac files generated, a Mac operating system generated that's not necessary to including repository, etc. Okay, and for the coursework, what we need to is actually need to exclude node modules subdirectory, and it can be quite big, so make it impossible to fit in the submission size. And this is, you can also add manually as well. It's just a text file. Okay, so I'm gonna go into this is my GitHub account. I'm gonna create a new repository now, and I'm gonna call this Heroku demo. Let's say that's what I call it, and I'll make it private and to demonstrate. How do I say? This can be up to you, and you can choose to add a README file. It's not important here, but you can also choose to add .git ignore file, and you can choose the templates. These are different templates you have. Obviously, there's a lot. Actually, does it have one express? No. And so if we just say, okay, I'm gonna create a git.ignore file for Node, and then you choose create the repository. So then this will create a new repository on GitHub. It's called Heroku demo. It has this file. If you click, you can see what's inside there. So this is list everything a Node JS project might have, but it's not necessary. For example, these are temporary files generated by some compile process, etc. And you can see a node module is here. So it tells you this is dependency directories, and are not needed. And for example, if you did your front end and using the command line tools for Vue, there's a few other things it can be excluded as well. Okay, so this is one way. And the other way, you can just create this file manually. And you can create a file, just call it, name it, and .git ignore, and just put node modules inside that file. And that also works to exclude everything. And it won't have the other things listed here. Sorry, it's probably super small. But for us, just this line, node modules will be sufficient. Okay, yeah. I think we already said, and you can also create this as a text file and add to your project. For example, I can just go here and create a file called git ignore and including that file as well. Maybe I'll do that. So to do this, I'm gonna just first, and where's my GitHub? Yeah, I'm gonna first and delete this file here. Oops. I need to go back to delete. Okay, And the reason is just I don't want to have a conflict. So when you have two files have the same name, one on the GitHub repository and the other one on your locally, it might have a conflict and you have to resolve. But instead, I can just demonstrate. I'll just type in Git Ignore, okay, and then I just say node, I called node modules. Okay, that would also work, and this way it will exclude everything that contains node modules in the file name or file path. That also work. Okay, and then here I'm going to show you a slightly different way to link your local folder to a remote repository. And what all we have done before is say once we create this repository on the GitHub, and then we go here, we copy the URL here, and then we do a git clone, and also clone the repository locally, and then add code to that particular folder after you've done the git clone. But in this case, and it's slightly different in the sense we already have a local folder, which is this one called demo, and it has some file in it. I want to link this folder to my repository, this particular repository. Okay, I'm going to show you how to do this here. Okay, first you need to make this folder a Git repository. So all you need to do is go to that folder and type git init, and similar to npm init, which starts a new npm project, and git init to make that folder into a Git repository. So that's what I'm going to do it now. Just make sure I'm in the right direction. Yeah, that seems to be. So if I type git init, okay, and it says initialized empty Git repository, etc., etc. And you can see you have these and icons there as well, because now GitHub recognized you have these new things. Sorry, the Visual Studio Code, the GitHub page recognized this is a repository, these are the new files, etc. Okay, and we're gonna just do everything for now and using the command line, and we're gonna, once it's connected, and you can do the same here using Visual Studio Code to push your code to the repository. Okay, and then create the Git Ignore files, which we already did. I just add node modules in there. Okay, and the next line is to git add all the files with .git.add. And so that's the git command, and the dot means everything in the directory. So I'm gonna just come here. I'm gonna say git. Actually, you can say git status, and it will say no commits yet. These are the untracked files. And then if I type in git add everything dot, and you run git status again, you can see, okay, these are the files, new files. These are the changes to be committed. Okay, and then you can actually commit these files. Git commit. You need a message. If you don't want to go to say VR editor, first version. Okay. Okay, and next one, you need to create an empty repository on GitHub, which we already did. Okay, so this is the part which is a bit new. We haven't seen that before, is to link your local folder to the remote Git repository. Okay, so you need to say git remote add origin followed by the URL of the Git repository. And this is something you can get just by copying this line here. So that's essentially this line. Okay. So what you need to do is now you say git remote. That means the remote server. You add origin is special name for the remote server and followed by the URL. So that's the URL I copied from here. Okay. Now these two are now linked. So basically, this local folder will be linked to this remote repository, and that's it. Okay, yeah. So this URL here will changes depends on whatever URL you get here. Okay. Okay, and then now finally we can now push the code to the remote repository. So you say git push. This one stands for where you want to push to, and you want to push to origin. So that's the same here. That's the name for the remote server. It's just that's a special name. That's the default name. And this one, the main, is the branch name. So by default, it used to be master, but if you come here, you can see on the GitHub now, the default name is now called main. So that's why you put main here. Okay. So you type in git push. In terms of remote, I want to push to origin. Origin basically refers to this URL. That's what we set it here. And then the branch I want to push to is called main. Hmm? Okay. Git push u origin main. Error failed to push some ref to. Why is that? Did I get the wrong URL or? No, I don't understand why that's the case. Ah. Source ref specs main does not match any. Oh, let me see if I can do it here. Okay. It seems something happened. Okay. And so what I just did is I did the push in here using Visual Studio Code push. I'm a bit small, and it pushed the code. It managed to push, but now it's still called master branch. It's still called master instead of called main. Okay. I guess it's okay. You can still see our code out there now. Okay, now we go back to, go back to actually the Heroku, and you choose create a new app. New app. Okay, and okay, and this name has to be unique, and you choose a region and create the app. Okay, sorry, this might be still a little bit too small. Okay, you choose a name for your server, an area. So because we are in UK, so it doesn't make too much difference. So it's UK or Europe, and you click. Okay, and next part is to connect to your Heroku server to the repository you have on the GitHub. And then you choose deploy, and then choose GitHub, and they will ask you to select authorization, allow you to connect to GitHub. I think this will not, I will not have this screen because I already authorized before. So if I go deploy, I choose GitHub. Okay, and then you need to select which repository you want to connect to. My repository is called Heroku server, Heroku demo. So I'm gonna select Heroku. Okay, that's the one I want to connect to. Oops.
Is it possible to connect more than one repository at the moment? I mean, at the same time?
No. So for each app, you can only connect to one repository, but you can create multiple apps, each connect to a different repository.
So for our coursework, we're gonna just connect to our backend.
Yes. You can only have one backend. I'm slightly worried it's not connecting to the correct branch. So actually which allows you to choose the branch. And for example, and you should choose master because in our case, the code is on the master. Even the main is set as default. And because it connects to the main branch, there'll be no files there. Nothing is going to happen. But it seems somehow, okay, yeah, it's here. So you can choose to connect to master, and you click automatically enable automatic deploy. That means every time when you have some new changes pushed to your GitHub repository, and then the server will be automatically updated. Okay, and that's what we need to do in terms of setting it up. Okay. I still have to add a little bit more. And the next step is, yeah.
Do you mind just going through the last step, which I didn't get it quite? Like, where do we need to go? Like, okay, after connected.
After connected, there will be something option here, which allows you to choose which branch to use and whether to enable the automatic deploy. So if you look at the slides, and go back, it allows you to the automatic deploy part, or say choose the branch and then enable the automatic deploy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And next we need to go to the settings. So basically so first we tell Heroku to get code from this repository. And next we need to tell it and what kind of server or language that is, because it supports many different servers. So what you need to do is to add build, they call it add build pack. And then you choose node. So basically that just tells Heroku this is a node. And this says new pack configuration will be used. I think that's all you need to do now. And you choose add pack and then choose node. Okay. Once you add, we need to go back to the deploy branch and you can actually deploy. Deploy means just started the server and running. And you will see some message like this. It will try to start up the server. And if everything goes okay, it will see something like that, deployed to Heroku. That's what we're going to do. So now we set this to add Heroku as a build pack. We go back to deploy. Now you should have this manual deploy option now. And you just click deploy. And then you should have some message like this. For example, it's okay, starting to install the node and say installed Express and MongoDB, those packages you need. Okay. And you say build successful. It's okay. Okay. And if you see something like this, that means your app was successfully deployed. Okay. Yeah, and if you click view, okay. And so if you click a view, it actually go directly to your Heroku app, and you might not be able to see, but it says CST3145-demo.herokuapp.com, and this is our root path response when we're not typing anything. But also, is that access? Did I miss any part? Yeah. Which part is this? Sorry. Okay. Open that. Or... Okay, and I can't remember where we get this part now. And you can use open app, which we just did. So which is also the same as and click view after here, or just click open app here, which will open this page, which is the root path for your deployed. And if it's okay, it should show this. And for example, if I type in product or that products, it's product, not S. Still misspelled. Please. No.
You need to have a collection.
That's right.
Yeah.
Need to have the collection. Okay, yay. So for example, if I type in this one now, that means my Git collection/products route is working, and I retrieve these data from my MongoDB.
Kai, a quick question here.
Yeah.
When we are for the second coursework, we need to make the request in the Postman. So which we need to make a collection with the request. So do you want the request with this method, I mean with Heroku, or it can be also the local port?
No, it should be the Heroku.
So when we make request, it should be with the Heroku link.
Yes, because when I check in your submissions, I will not be able to access your local server. For example, if I want to run and your Postman request when I'm marking, and it can't connect to your local computers, but it can connect to the Heroku server and test the request to see if it's working.
I have another question.
Okay, fine. Thank
you.
Yeah. So you see, when we're deploying the Node.js server, yeah. Why can't we just have a public folder inside our server and run it as a static files? So instead of deploying front end and a back end into two different repositories, we can just have everything in one repository and run the front end from Heroku as well.
I mean, if you want to put the front end code in the GitHub repository with the backend code and then deploy everything onto Heroku, so long as it works, it's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. Then.
But as I said, so if you make it a public, you have to make sure they can't access your server access credentials, and it's up to you. And if you don't really care, then that's fine. I guess maybe activities. No access. Okay, sorry. And this is the domains. Okay, so it's under the settings, and that's the domains where you can see actually the URL for your Heroku server. Okay. Again, if you just click open, it goes to the same URL as well. Go back to the lecture slides. Just a little bit running behind now. Okay, and so in your case, when you first run, you might get an error, and that is because so you can actually so that's some other things, and obviously in our case it worked properly. When we type in say /collection/products, it returns everything, and that's because I already fixed that. And if you have any error, and you can choose more and use view logs in Heroku. So this is almost like a command line. You can see what are the error messages you had when you run, or even any other output. And so you can choose more and view log, and that gives you this information. Because we don't have any errors, so that's completely fine here. And the other way to do this, but in this particular case, it actually tells you there's some errors. Okay, it says failed, blah, 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 but it's not particularly useful. And it says status changed from starting to crash. That means your server didn't start properly. Okay, and another way to see a bit more details and is choose more and then run console, and you should see something like this. Then you can type in your command line. For example, I just want to start my server again so I can see what error message it is. And you can just do this, say npm start. And this will give you a little bit more details about what is happening. And we can try to do this. I can say more, run console, and I say npm. I might have to stop first. Anyway, let's just do npm start. It might give you a complaint. And we'll do something. Yeah. Okay, in this case, there's nothing. It just says an express server is running at localhost 3000. And this is exactly what our code is written to do. But if you have error message, you might see some error message. Okay, and here it says cannot read property DB of undefined. Okay, and the reason is about the network access control inside MongoDB Atlas. If you remember, we have to manually set the IP address that can access the MongoDB database online, the online MongoDB database. So you have to manually add your IP address, which are hidden here. Okay, and this is a bit difficult for Heroku because the server IP actually changes. So what we're going to do instead is we're going to allow access from all the IP addresses. And to do this, you just add a new entry and click allow access from anywhere. And when it shows up, it will shows up something like this, 0.0.0.0/0. That means any IP address. So if you go here, so this is what you can see. I already add another one, which is 0.0.0. That means any IP address can access my MongoDB. That's why when I try to access it, it worked. Even it is from my newly set up the Heroku server. Okay, and just to show you very quickly, you can add an IP address. It doesn't have that option. So usually when you select, it should have this allow access from anywhere option button here. And maybe because I already enabled that, so I don't have that button here. But this should be where you see that button. Otherwise, it should be somewhere here. Something like this. And if you end up with, I can cancel now, have something like this, and that means all the IP address can access your MongoDB, and that should solve any Heroku access problems. Okay, yeah, that's what it looked like. Okay, and then after that, you need to restart your dynos. And essentially, this is like restarting your server. This is the case when you first run, it crashed, it had error. And then once you change the settings, access settings in your online MongoDB, then you need to restart the server here. And just choose more, restart all dynos. That basically means restarting the backend server. Let's give you a little bit of warning. Yeah. So, okay, and it says state change from starting to up. That means your server is back and running now. Okay, and then now if you're typing, say, collection/messages, sorry, collection/products, and you should see what I had just saw there before. Okay. So that's everything in terms of how you get your backend server running on Heroku, and that is needed for the next coursework. Okay, and finally, I'm just going to talk a little bit more about the front-end access. And we talked about fetch before, but previous examples only use the get request. Now we need to change to, say, use other type of requests like a put or post or even delete. And then the fetch command line of code will be slightly different. Okay, and so this line is just to say to get data when you first start your Vue app or the front page. So the idea would be previously your front end would get the list of lessons and from, say, an external JavaScript file. Now it should get it from the database. Okay, and it's recommended to use created or just use created function, and that is something will be run when the Vue instance is created, so when it first starts. So these will be the code which actually gets the data from your Heroku server. So you do a fetch, and this should be your Heroku app path. So this will be a different URL, and maybe it will be /collections/lessons or something. And you get a response object, and obviously you need to use then because it's a promise, and you need to pass the response into a JSON object. Again, you need to use then because this returns a promise, and you say store.products equal to JSON. Okay, so that means once you pass the response you get back from the server, you save that in my store is my Vue instance, and the products, it was empty. Now I stored a list of products I get returned. In your case, you probably want to store that to something like a lessons, which is defined as part of the data of your Vue instance. And so I think, and after coursework 1, most of these parts will be the same. The only part is, say, this part used to be get data from, just to say, store.product equal to whatever the name of the array you define in the JavaScript file. Now it has to be replaced with a fetch command. And this is a fetch, we already covered it before. It's just by default doing the get. And the other one is you need to post a method, a different other type of fetch request. It's not just get, and the command will be slightly different. So previously we just say fetch and do the URL and then .zen, which will handle the promise, which is the callback function inside the bracket. Now you have to say fetch URL and have a request object, and then the rest will be the same. So inside the request object here, you will specify the actual method. Is it the post, delete, or put, or even get? And you set the request header, and this specifies the data type. So that's the type of data you can including in the body of the request. So if you remember, and in these kind of put request, inside the body, you're going to specify certain type of data you're going to send. And in the header, you need to put some information in there to say I'm going to send JSON data, for example. And finally, the body. Body will be actually the data you want to send. For example, when you post, then you're creating a new JSON document or JSON object, and that JSON object should be inside the body, and you can send it. Okay, and so this is what it will look like. And so this is the, say, the new JSON object we want to add to our collection in the MongoDB, and it just says title and price with a very simple JSON object. Okay, this is what the fetch command would look like. I'm gonna just try to explain. So the format is like this: you fetch, and then the URL of the fetch, and the request object, and then anything you want to do in the callback functions after that's completed. Okay, and that's the URL. Again, depends on what Heroku URL you get. This might be slightly different. Also depends on what you want to do. And this might be different collections, not products. Okay, and then here is the starting of my request object. Start from here and ends here. Okay, I'm gonna specify the method is post. Okay, and it needs to be capital. And I specify my header. This is mostly to specify the type of data you want to send. So you say content type application/JSON. So that sets the data type as JSON. That's all we need. You can set other types. You can set binary data, you can set text data. But for us, we only need JSON. Okay, and then you need the body, which is the data you're gonna send. So the new product is what the new product here, and you can't send it just as a JSON object. You have to do JSON string file, turn that into a string before you send. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, and then after that, you can do some callback function handling the response you get after it's complete. So the response will be whatever the response you get back from the server. It could be an error message, could be just say things is successful. By default, it will just respond back the object it creates, the JSON object it created. So that's why, and we are passing it with use.json. So just pass it as a JSON object, and then once you pass it into as a JSON, and then you can console log it. It just says console log success, and this response JSON, which is this one here, which is the result of passing the response as a JSON object. And okay, and you might have some errors first as well. So when you first access, and it can potentially have a error like this. Okay, so it's something similar to the cross original, but if you read carefully, it says access control allow headers. Okay, it's a bit different, say access control allow origins. Okay, to avoid this type of an error, and you just need to say add another line similar to this. So in your current backend Express server, you should have this line. So that basically means allows any IP address to access this server. And you need to add another line and says access control allow headers. So that just means allows to send different type of the files. If you remember here, we set in the header section, we set it to JSON. That's needed. And if you have this line, it will allows you to send any type of headers in your request. Okay, and after that, and it should work. Okay, and that's the readings. So that's a tutorial in terms of deploying a Node.js app into the Heroku. And there's a bit more information from the Mozilla Development Network in terms of using the fetch. And just because of time, and I don't have time to type this example in the browser manually, but I did had one created early on. Let me see if I have time to run this. Not this one. This is not the right one. For this one, okay, this is one we created for the backend, but not what we need now is the front end. Let me see if I can have the front end running. Okay, and so that's the front end. And so that's not the entire, say, the web store example. It just only demonstrates one and post request. And so the code is exactly the same as what we wrote in here. We created that's a JSON object, which is what we want to send to. And this is the URL. And it should be able to handle post request, I think. In our case, our URL will be a bit different. Where is our URL? 3145 demo, so that will be -demo. That's the other one we tried. We want to send a post, we're sending JSON, and these are the information. Okay. To run this, all you need to do is just open this HTML file, and it will run this script, which is this part. And when you get anything back, it should just display and on the page. Okay, if I click go live. Okay, and so it says add a new product to collection. That's what these text here for. And the response and type error failed to fetch. Okay, type error failed to fetch. Let me see if I can do this very quickly because we already run out of time. Console. Okay, yeah, that's the exact problem we had before, and it's blocked by the cross-original access protocol because we hasn't, add these lines to our server yet. So what you need to do is you need to add that line to your server, then update, push that change to the GitHub, which will be reflected in your Heroku, and then it should work. Yeah. And okay, I think I'll stop there now as we already run out of time.
Kai, I have a quick question, yeah.
Yeah.